My name is Thomas, and I take pride in my property. After years of hard work, I finally bought a place with a backyard big enough for a decent-sized pool. I spent weeks scrubbing, skimming, and meticulously balancing the chemicals until the water shimmered with an almost unnatural clarity. It was my sanctuary, a place to unwind after long days. Then, Karen arrived. It started subtly. I'd notice her standing at the edge of my property, peering through the hedges that separated my yard from the street. At first, I dismissed it as curiosity. Our neighborhood had a lot of walkers, people enjoying the afternoon sun. But the lingering stares became more frequent, her face etched with a strange mixture of envy and suspicion. She would stand there for extended periods of time just watching. One scorching afternoon, as I was lounging by the pool, soaking up the sun, I heard the gate creak open. I sat up, instantly alert, and saw her standing there, her eyes narrowed. She was a woman of a certain age, impeccably coiffed blonde hair, sunglasses perched on her nose, and an expression that screamed entitlement. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Is this your pool?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral, though a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "It's suspiciously clear," she declared, as if accusing me of some heinous crime. "What chemicals are you using? It's probably dangerous." I sighed inwardly. "Just standard pool chemicals, ma'am. I follow the instructions carefully. I assure you, it's perfectly safe." She didn't seem to believe me. She began to circle the pool, her lips pursed. "I've never seen a pool this clear. It's unnatural. It's suspicious." I felt my patience wearing thin. "Is there anything else I can help you with, ma'am? Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're trespassing." She raised an eyebrow, feigning offense. "Trespassing? I just have concerns about the water quality. Someone needs to investigate this." Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and began tapping away, muttering something about calling the authorities. That's when I knew things were about to escalate. This wasn't about water quality, it was about something else entirely. I could feel it in the air, a thick, suffocating cloud of prejudice and unfounded suspicion. I really couldn't believe what was happening. "I'm calling 911. I have a feeling this guy is using some toxic chemicals in his pool," Karen announced loudly into her phone, her voice amplified by the sudden silence that had fallen over my backyard. I stood there, stunned. My heart began to pound in my chest. "Ma'am, you can't be serious. I've done nothing wrong. Why are you doing this?" She ignored me, continuing her frantic report to the 911 operator. "Yes, I'm at my address. I believe there's something illegal happening here. The pool water is abnormally clear. Like unnaturally clear. I think he's hiding something. He's a black man, and I have a feeling he's doing something illegal. I want someone to come and investigate immediately." I cringed at her words. The blatant racism hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I had heard stories about these Karens, but I never thought I'd be a target myself. This was my property, my haven, and she was trying to weaponize her privilege, her race, to disrupt my life. Within minutes, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached my house. I braced myself for the inevitable. When the officers arrived, Karen practically vibrated with self-righteous indignation. She launched into a tirade about the pool, the chemicals, and her concerns for the neighborhood. The officers, a young black woman and an older white man, listened patiently, their expressions unreadable. The female officer, Officer Jones, approached me. "Mr. Thomas, is it? We received a call regarding your pool. Can you explain what's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Officer, this woman, I believe her name is Karen, has been harassing me for days. She claims my pool water is too clear and that I'm using dangerous chemicals. She's trespassing on my property and now she's called the police with false accusations. Officer Jones nodded, her gaze shifting back to Karen, who was still ranting about the suspiciously clear water. Ma'am, we need you to calm down. Mr. Thomas has a right to maintain his property as he sees fit, as long as he's following local regulations. But the water. It's too clear. It's not natural. Karen shrieked, pointing a finger at my pool. Officer Jones sighed. We'll need to inspect the pool, Mr. Thomas. Do you mind? Of course, officer, I said, gesturing towards the pool. I have nothing to hide. As the officers began their inspection, I couldn't shake the feeling of injustice. Here I was, being scrutinized and questioned, simply because a woman with a prejudiced mind couldn't stand the thought of me enjoying my own property. As Officer Jones and her partner examined the pool, Karen continued to hover nearby, muttering about toxins and conspiracies. I tried to ignore her, focusing on the officers and hoping they would see through her charade. Officer Jones walked over to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. Mr. Thomas, the chemical levels seem normal. Everything appears to be within the acceptable range. Your pool is exceptionally well maintained, but it's not illegal. Karen gasped. But the clarity. It's not possible. Officer Jones turned to Karen, her voice firm. Ma'am, we found no evidence of any wrongdoing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property. You're trespassing and making false accusations. Karen's face turned a shade of purple. I demand to speak to your supervisor. This is outrageous. As her partner was getting ready to escort Karen off the property, Officer Jones spotted something unusual near the fence line. What's that? She asked, pointing to a section of the hedge that seemed slightly flattened. We all walked over to investigate. Pushing aside the branches, we discovered a small, carefully concealed hole in the fence. Beyond the hole, we saw Karen's backyard, a neglected patch of overgrown grass and a sad-looking patio. Officer Jones frowned. What's this, ma'am? Karen stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. Officer Jones stepped through the hole into Karen's yard. She bent down and picked up something from the ground, a small, empty bottle of pool algaseed. The label was partially torn, but still legible. This is interesting, Officer Jones said, holding up the bottle. Algaseed. And judging by the residue, it's the same brand you use, Mr. Thomas. I stared at the bottle in disbelief. That's my brand. I use it to keep the algae at bay. Officer Jones turned back to Karen, her voice now laced with suspicion. Ma'am, can you explain why you have a bottle of Mr. Thomas's algaseed in your yard? And why there's a hole in the fence connecting your property to his? Karen's face crumpled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting around in panic. The silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Karen's carefully constructed facade of righteous indignation had crumbled, replaced by a look of raw, desperate fear. Officer Jones pressed her further. Ma'am, we need an explanation. Are you taking chemicals from Mr. Thomas's property? Finally, Karen cracked. Okay, fine. I took some, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't want to cause any trouble. I couldn't afford to treat my own pool. I was stunned. You have a pool? I hadn't even noticed it from the street. It's a disaster, Karen whined. It's filled with algae and stagnant water. I can't afford the chemicals to clean it. I saw how clear your pool was, and I thought if I took a little algaseed, it would help. The absurdity of the situation hit me. She had harassed me, accused me of illegal activities, and called the police on me, all because she was secretly stealing my pool chemicals. Officer Jones sighed, shaking her head in disbelief. Ma'am, stealing is a crime. And making false accusations to the police is a crime as well. You could be facing serious charges. Karen began to sob. Please, don't arrest me. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted a clean pool. The other officer read her Miranda rights. While the police spoke with Karen, I finally noticed the full picture of her backyard. Hidden behind a tangle of vines and weeds, I saw it, a murky, algae-choked swimming pool. It was a depressing sight, a stark contrast to the sparkling oasis I had created in my own yard. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity for her. She was clearly struggling, both financially and emotionally. But that didn't excuse her actions. Her sense of entitlement, her prejudice, and her willingness to call the police on a black man based on nothing but her own assumptions were unforgivable. After a lengthy conversation, the officers placed Karen under arrest. She was charged with petty theft, trespassing, and filing a false police report. As they led her away in handcuffs, she kept repeating, "I didn't mean any harm. I just wanted a clean pool." The scene was surreal. My peaceful afternoon had been shattered by a woman driven by envy, desperation, and prejudice. And now, she was being led away in handcuffs, her dreams of a pristine pool dissolving into a nightmare of legal trouble. Officer Jones approached me. "Mr. Thomas, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. This woman's actions were completely unacceptable. We'll make sure she's held accountable." I nodded, still reeling from the events. "Thank you, officer. I appreciate it." The police left, taking Karen with them. I was left standing in my backyard, staring at my pool, which suddenly seemed tainted, violated by Karen's presence. The serenity was gone, replaced by a bitter taste of injustice. Word of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors expressed their sympathy, while others admitted they weren't surprised by Karen's behavior. Apparently, she had a reputation for being difficult and entitled. Over the next few days, I tried to regain a sense of normalcy. I cleaned the pool, scrubbing away any lingering traces of Karen's intrusion. But the memory of her accusations, her prejudice, and her desperation lingered in my mind. I received a call from the police department a few days later. Karen had been formally charged and was awaiting trial. They asked if I wanted to press further charges, but I declined. I decided that the arrest and the public humiliation were punishment enough. A few weeks later, as I was relaxing by my pool, I heard a tentative knock on my front door. I opened it to find a young woman standing there, her eyes downcast. "Mr. Thomas?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I'm Sarah, Karen's daughter." I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. "Yes, Sarah. What can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize for my mother's behavior," she said, her voice trembling. "I know it doesn't excuse what she did, but she's been going through a really hard time. She lost her job a few months ago, and she's been struggling to make ends meet. That's why she couldn't afford to maintain her pool." I listened patiently, my initial anger slowly giving way to a sense of understanding. "I know what she did was wrong," Sarah continued. "But I was hoping, maybe you could find it in your heart to forgive her. She's really sorry." I thought for a moment. "Sarah, your mother's actions were hurtful and prejudiced. But I understand that people make mistakes, especially when they're under stress. I'm willing to forgive her, but she needs to understand the gravity of what she did." Sarah's face lit up. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. That means so much to me. But here's the twist," she said, "Mr. Thomas, my mother, she has been planning on having you move from this neighborhood for the longest time. She always felt as if you shouldn't be living in this area. She had been saying for months now that she wants to find every method to scare you into moving out of the neighborhood. She had even been planning on poisoning your pool slowly to make sure no one can use it, and everyone would think that the water isn't healthy. That's also why she was secretly putting the algaseed into her pool, so she can claim that you're doing something wrong with your pool, and the chemicals will somehow get into her pool as well. She's been trying to find any dirt on you. That day she had been planning on calling the cops, and falsely accuse you. I was shocked. It turns out this wasn't just a case of a Karen trying to be a racist, but it was a planned hateful incident to have me move to create a better image of Karen's neighborhood. I couldn't accept her apology. The hate that she had was a shock to me, and it was the most unreal experience that I've ever gone through. I really didn't believe what I was hearing.